What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of our Three Things Postgame podcast. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones, and as you can tell, he's joining us from Wallace Wade Stadium in Durham, a stadium I was actually in not too long ago. I decided to come home for this one just to make our postgame process a little bit quicker and my microphone quality a little bit better as well. So, AJ, we're here after Carolina's 21-20 loss to Duke. On that field right there behind you. I guess you can't really see it, but you're not too far from it. Right there, you see that light shining in over there from Wallace Wade. But AJ, Carolina dropping to 3-2. Duke proving to 5-0 for the first time since 1994. 17-0 lead for Carolina at the half, and 21-20 loss is what it results in. But we're not going to start with the offense, AJ. We're going to start with the defense. It's where we need to start on this one. And unfortunately, I think we're going to be kind of talking about collapses, for lack of a better word, on both sides of the ball tonight.
It's the word.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And again, Carolina's defense in that second half just was something we've talked about a lot, not only in the Mac Brown era, but going back before that. I know you've been covering this program for a very long time. Couldn't get a stop when they needed one, man. I know late in the game they were able to kind of get off the field and give the ball back to the offense, which you got to give them credit for that, because Carolina was once again on the road at Duke, behind, had the ball last, and did have an opportunity to go down and score, but couldn't do it. We'll talk about that in a second. But AJ, really good first half from the defense, less than 100 yards for Duke. And then it flips on its head, 21-3 in the second half. Duke finishes 394 yards on the night, less than Carolina ends up finishing with in the game. And man, it was funny because I was in the press box in the first half with you, and then in the second half I went down to the field. And about halfway through that third quarter, I just couldn't shake the feeling of, I don't think Carolina's going to pull this one out, because it just seemed like Duke was getting whatever it wanted to on offense, really. And that's ultimately how it ended. So how did you see it? A little bit different perspective from where you were sitting, but was it as bad up there as it looked on the field for me?
In fairness, a couple of positives after a really good first half. I thought the pass coverage was not bad in the second half. Carolina's not happy with the PI called on Caleb Cost. If that's not called, they force a field goal for Duke.
I was right there for that play.
Score another possession.
I was right there for that play.
It's questionable. I mean, I like when officials let kids play out on the edge. I don't mind a little jostling back and forth. I think it's part of the game, and it should be part of the game. But that's not why they lost. I mean, they shouldn't have been down there in the first place. Mm-hmm. They were down there because Carolina just did not. Man, it was a finger snap. Carolina got the ball first to start the second half, drove down the field and scored. And they were fortunate because they had another punt block, by the way.
Yeah, special teams.
And you get two offensive linemen in your punch shield. I talked about this last week, and they weren't lateral enough to reach the Duke player coming in who blocked the kick. A lot of teams use tight ends, linebackers. Tight ends are good. They got hands, and they're rangy, and they're lengthy, and they're big enough. They're not going to get bowled over. Carolina's got to fix this. It's been a problem every year. But they got very fortunate on that play, got the maintained possession of the ball, ended up kicking a field goal to go up 20-0. Over the next 18 minutes of football, Duke scored 21 points and gained 267 yards. Mm-hmm. That sounds like Georgia Tech in the fourth quarter last year. That sounds like late first, through the second quarter last week against JMU. I mean, we have seen this so many times before that if I'm viewing this, listening to this, and I'm a UNC fan, it would be very difficult for me to have faith and that this is not going to happen periodically for however long it happens. So they were getting blown off at the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. They were giving up chunk plays. They were missing tackles. Missing tackles hasn't been a huge issue for this team. It was, I believe, against I think they missed some tackles against Minnesota, but they cleaned it up a little bit. A lot of missed tackles today, a lot of bad angles. I had said through the first four games, at least I never really saw them in any disarray in pre-snap. And I thought that's one obvious improvement. Tonight, I saw numerous times when I think even when you were up there, where they were not ready when the ball was snapped. They were changing things. And Amari Campbell, who's the communicator on defense, is trying to get everybody to know whatever the new call is or whatever. And they were getting just crushed at the line of scrimmage, didn't get much pressure. And to be perfectly honest with you, there were in the first half, as good as it was, there were a couple times where I thought Malik Murphy missed possible touchdown passes. He was not good in the first half. He was a lot better in the second. They got the ball on the edge. What's amazing is Duke's edge looked faster, more athletic than Carolina's edge. And that's at least been something that Carolina usually has when it goes into games. Doesn't mean they play well, but they've got a lot of speed and athletic ability and bounce on the edges, and it was non-existent. And then they got to stop on that fourth down late. I'm not sure why Duke even ran that play. I was very curious play calling, but they got the stop there, but they couldn't capitalize because they had those two penalties and put themselves in a bad situation. So last week we said after the 70-50 debacle that Murphy's Law showed up and hung around throughout that whole game. I think Murphy's Law, snuck a peek in on this one too, because it got to the point in the second half after they went up, even before they went up 20-0 because that block punt. Every little aspect of the team and the program that needs work and refinement and improving, it needs more fiber, was just on display. And the defense, because this offense isn't going to outscore good teams. The defense needs to be good enough so the offense can win in the 20s. That's why a bunch of us were picking this game would be in the 20s, because I don't think this is a very potent offense. But the defense has to be really good a lot of the time. And they were for a while and then weren't. So when Duke started racking up those first downs on 10, 11, 12, 18, 19-yard plays, it got into a rhythm. And something about North Carolina defense for a long time, that when an opponent starts going downhill, it doesn't show the ability to stop the opponent from going downhill. It's like a waterfall that they can't escape, and they end up getting doused and losing. That's what happened last week. That's what happened in the second half today. Duke didn't get the ball until 8.5 minutes left in the third quarter, and it was 20-0.
Yeah.
It was.
What you gonna say?
Honestly, what can I say? Statistically, overall for the game, I think they would take this a lot of games overall, but not when you can't move the ball, not when you're over-reliant on Armarian because you have no choice, not when your quarterback can't go through his checkdowns. I mean, they say complimentary football. Well, they didn't do enough of that tonight, and unless they're damn near pristine, when you look at the schedule, it's hard to find wins moving forward unless one side is just awesome while the other side is at least okay. Yeah. And that wasn't the case tonight.
Yeah, I mean, AJ, I'm looking at this stat broadcast right here. 111 rushing yards for Duke in the fourth quarter. 185 for the game. 37 in the third quarter. 111 rushing yards in the fourth quarter alone. I mean, that's the game right there. I mean, it wasn't a high-scoring game. You give up 111 rushing yards in a quarter, you're going to lose a game when you scored 20 points. I mean, it's just – I think that really just sums it up right there. It just felt like – granted, a Duke team that hasn't been great necessarily running the ball coming into the night. And, they haven't been 11 in the quarter. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
What can I say, Jacob? Seriously. I don't know how to parse this thing without – they lost the game that they were up 20-0 midway through the third quarter. They lost their rival, and they did it a week after the 70-50. I think these games connect, and we'll talk about that later. But it does with the defense too, because everything Alonzo Barnett saw last week throughout most of that game, Malik Murphy saw in the second half today. He saw the same things, and guess what? He took advantage of it, and they lost. So if you're only scoring 20 points, your defense needs to be better than 21. That's the way it is.
I mean, it's not right.
I think a lot of people thought there was a chance this defense would be better than that. And they did play really well for a while. 97 yards at halftime for Duke with 6 first downs. But you got to play 4 quarters. And they didn't play 4 quarters. Let's remember, they gave that long drive in the end of the game against Minnesota. They gave up 8 explosives against Charlotte. New coordinator. We've seen a lot of positive things. His background's pretty good, but it's not clicking right now as much as it needs to click. Last week was a disaster. Charlotte was not a good performance. Even Central drove on them early, but at least they rebounded. But that's Central. That's over here. The other 4 they played are right here in front of you, and it's not like Minnesota's got a great offense. So This defense is what it is. It's okay. Yeah. Last week it stunk. It's okay, but it's not good enough to prevent the waterfall from pouring over.
Yeah, let's talk about the offense for a second, because again, tale of two halves again. I mean, I don't really know what else to say besides that. 17-0 at the break. I've said it already. Carolina offensively looked the better team in the first half. There's no doubt about it. And then in the second half, it just went dry. And for me, I get the sentiment with the defense. I get the frustration with the defense. But I was talking to you off camera, AJ, and I told you what I saw tonight is what I expected to see going into the season. I expected to see an offense that was going to be extremely over-reliant on Omarion Hampton, but was not going to be elite just because of the quarterback situation, just because of the struggles that they were going to have replacing a guy like Drake May, especially when Mac Johnson gets hurt in the first game. You go to Connor Harrell, and now you're on the third-string guy in Criswell. Again, regardless of who the quarterback was going to be before the season, this is kind of what I expected offensively. Yeah. And then defensively, on the flip side of the ball, I expected a defense to be better. And I think for the most part, you saw an improved product for a big chunks of the game tonight. And at the end of the day, AJ, 21 points on the road to a Duke offense who has been pretty good this year, second best offense coming in the league coming into this game tonight. You give up 21 points on the road and you lose the game. Again, you can look at all that and you can break it down, but the fact of the matter is once again, it's a tale of two halves. And for me, while the defense was poor, while the defense couldn't make stops when it needed to, I have to shift over that offense once again and say, hey, man, you got 17 points at the half. You finished with 20 for the game. You struggle moving the ball. Omarion Hampton has what? Well, I think you said 35 touches, counting a couple penalties in there. And he's extremely quiet in the second half, too. Just finishes with just over 100 yards rushing. So, again, I wasn't surprised by anything I saw tonight. But when you're on the road to your rival, and you score 3 points in the second half and give up 111 rushing yards in the fourth quarter, AJ, you're going to lose the ball game. And that's what happened tonight.
Last week, when we did our three things, we talked about how tough it would be with the physicality versus Duke. Carolina lost in the second half because of the line of scrimmage on both sides. Yeah. The offensive line was getting blown up. Jacoby is not going to go into anything when you ask him questions. I asked him, did you have enough time to even get to your second progression much of the time? And I asked Mac. And Mac basically, you saw it. You saw it. He couldn't even get to the second read in the progression because there was no protection at all. Carolina's a little banged up the offensive line. Austin Blasky was limping a lot. They were just not – Duke was coming at them. They didn't pick stuff up. Criswell was moving. Criswell's more a pocket passer. And he couldn't lay down any roots in the pocket tonight, especially in the second half. And it led to all kinds of stuff. And he doesn't throw very well on the run yet. A lot of those balls end up places you're like, whoa, there's like no receiver anywhere in a catchable range from that. A lot of it just getting rid of the thing. His inexperience, I thought, showed in the second half tonight. He's an older player, but he doesn't have game experience, and he got rid of the ball. A couple times he missed Copenhagen going over the middle one time, which would have been a first down on a drive in the fourth quarter. There were a couple times he missed Bryson one time when he was open. But you're right, too reliant on Omarion. And when you're too reliant on somebody and they end up getting stopped because you get beat at the line of scrimmage, then what do you go to? They just didn't have another layer to kind of pull out and say, okay, now we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. The offense, 19 points in the opener, 38 against Charlotte when other people are scoring 50 and 60, 45 against Central when it was 17-10 in the fourth quarter. Not good. Last week, they scored 50 points, but you and I both talked how a lot of that was they were like empty calories. Mm-hmm. Had the game been different, I don't think JMU would have given up that kind of yardage and production, but they still got it. So you have to give them credit for it. And then today they were what they were. I think this is an offense that's going to be pulling teeth the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. They'll hit on a few big plays because Jacoby's got an arm, although he leads guys way too much on thirds downfield. I know that the wide receiver room is frustrated. They've been frustrated since week one. I get that, but they gotta get over that. They gotta recognize this is what you got. Mm-hmm. Drake, the old saying, it's overused, but I'll use it anyway. Drake and Sam are walking through that door, man. And it's not just Colby. It's the offensive line. It's who's the other running back? Where's the? They're not. Davian Goff got a couple of carries, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
They can't run the option with Jacoby like they did with Connor some because Jacoby's not quick enough.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm going to say this a lot tonight, but they are what they are. I just think they need the defense to be really good to win games moving forward, because the offense has not been. The defense has at least been really good at times. The offense hasn't really been really good compared to what they should be in each of those games. You can look back and say, man, 38, 45. No, wait a minute. 30 against Charlotte's not very impressive, especially where the game was in the fourth quarter. 45 against Central, they had 17 in the fourth quarter. You know?
Yeah.
And last week, they were down by 36 points at one time. It's not like JMU's going to, blitz like crazy and run the risk of big plays. So, and then tonight, I don't know what else to say, because
it's hard to analyze it, really.
It's hard and it's easy. You want to be diplomatic, you want to be fair and diplomatic. There were some things I liked the way Omarion ran early. They used him a whole lot, and once Duke adjusted, Carolina's like, well, gosh, we don't have any more tools in the shed, man. That's our tool, and they took it. So now I got no tools. So I'm going to stand here under the waterfall with no tools.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I think the reason it feels like we're just kind of talking about the same things we've been talking about throughout the season a little bit, but going back, I mean, it's O-line, for instance, AJ. I mean, we talked about it coming into this game. We knew Duke was going to be a physical team. We didn't see it in the first half. We're sitting up in the press box looking around like, Duke's offering absolutely nothing tonight. It looks flat. And
I was thinking maybe Duke's just not that good, and maybe Duke isn't that good.
I don't think it's great.
And they ended the 13-game Mac Brown streak over them, and Manny Diaz finally got Mac.
Yeah.
There's some celebrating going on in the Diaz household tonight.
Oh, for sure, man. Again, they earned it. But again, O-line, we talked about O-line coming into it. The season, we talked about, what are they? We don't really know. A lot of new faces. Then Blassie gets injured, and he's kind of in and out. And then, young guys down there. We didn't really know what to expect. And again, I think the reason you said it, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's hard and it's easy to analyze, because a lot of these things we're sitting here like, yeah, that's kind of what we expected. That's kind of what we've seen this year. But it's also like, again, 17-0 at the half. You only scored 3 in the second half, and I keep going back to that 111 rushing yards in the fourth quarter, AJ. That to me is the game.
Carolina had 3 points over its last 8 possessions.
That's it, man. I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah, Mac kept telling us the offensive line was better than last year, and I don't know if it is or isn't. I thought at times this year it looked a little bit better, a little cleaner, but it's unfair to compare this offensive line to last year's, when last year's had Drake, and this year's doesn't. And nothing close to Drake. So all that said, they still got whipped at the line of scrimmage.
That's where you
got whipped at the line of scrimmage. I think that there's really good parts that I can get better during the course of the year. But I'm telling you, man, it comes down to this defense has to be really good. The special teams can't stink. They can't have a 20-yard punt. You can't give teams yardage. You can't give them ground. They had a punt blocked and a 20-yard punt. So they don't do a lot of things super well. They don't. Yeah. And 5 games in, I think we know who they are.
Yeah.
They're a team that has some flare-ups. I think they could go through stretches where they're pretty good defensively, but they get figured out. I don't know what the adjustments were in the second half. Duke clearly made – I asked Javari Ritchie. They made adjustments, and he's not giving anything away. He's like, we just didn't – they made plays. Well, they made adjustments, and it looked like Carolina was not adjusting to their adjustments, if you will.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what it means real quick, because I think that to me is the biggest talking point.
I think that's what people want us to get to.
No, and I get it, and I think that's one of the biggest talking points from tonight, and really over the last couple of weeks, because it's been the conversation since the JMU game. It really has been where's this program at? What happens now? And I tweeted it out after the game, because for me, for a lot of fans tonight, this was it from a belief in the staff to turn this around perspective. And again, I understand it. I'm not going to sit here and say either way, because like you've said, I don't feel like that's my position. And I don't, again, like we've talked about for the last week, I don't feel like that solves the problem magically. Actually, I know it doesn't solve the problem magically, but I understand where people are coming from. And I think for a lot of fans tonight, the last couple of weeks, especially with the way that second half went tonight, I think this is going to be I think it is the nail in the coffin kind of moment for a lot of people. And again, I get that. But moving forward, I think the biggest, because we still have to focus on the season's not over yet, man. We're 5 games in. There's a lot of football left this year. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is you got Pitt coming up at home, very losable game. And at the same time, a winnable game in some aspects. And you got Georgia Tech after that. Again, a team that Carolina just struggles with mightily all the time. So you could easily see a couple losses in the next couple weeks. You can easily see this team sitting at, 3-4 through 7 games. And in a really bad position. But I think what we've talked about in this podcast, I think is the concern going into the year, AJ, is I think we know who this team is now. I think we've seen it. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I think the problem is what this team is kind of what we expected it to be going into the year, which I'll reiterate again. A defense that's okay is going to have some games where you look back at the JMU game I did not see coming. Not one bit. But a defense at the end of the day is, give up 21 points, but it's the way in which they do it. They're not going to win you a football game. And an offense that is going to ride the horse that's Omarion Hampton. And if that's not working very well, there really isn't much of a plan B. And that shouldn't really be a surprise when you look at kind of the quarterback situation and how that develops. Now, maybe Jacoby Criswell gets better and going into the year and he improves and the passing game improves and maybe they can outscore some teams. But I think the problem with Carolina is I don't know how this team takes that next step this year that it needs to do to keep winning games consistently. That is a concern tonight. And I don't know how it gets turned around. And I'm not sure it does.
5 games in, this is not a very good football. This is not a good football team. 5 games in, it's an okay team.
It's okay.
But it's not a good team.
Yeah, it's okay.
Can it be a good team? I think so. Jacoby each week should get better. He's a smart guy and he's got an arm.
He's got intangibles.
The offense needs to help him out. Offensive line needs to help him out a little bit more. No doubt about that. But I wonder, and I know that sometimes I tend to go strong on the psychology of sports because I believe it's huge. And perhaps some may say I go too far into that area. But I don't know how you cut the cord because I think last week and this week are connected now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they were supposed to move on from that. And it looked like for 2.5 quarters they had. You know what? They're showing some stuff out there. And they did. The coaches had them ready to play. Mm-hmm. They had them ready to play. I thought that they were prepared. They had good schemes. They played really good football for 2.5 quarters. The kind of football that you think, they can win some games in this league and end up having a decent season if this continues. The problem is it's a four-quarter game. So they didn't close the deal, didn't know how to close the deal. And last week, they didn't know how to stop the freight train. And in a way, that was the case today. You lose confidence quickly, especially when it was supposed to be different. And I do think the defense is better. But when the offense doesn't score a whole lot, that means the defense is, when they're not really good in stretches, it's going to stand out more. If last year's defense was what this year's defense has been, that team would have been better than 8-4 so far. Yeah. But that's not the case. You got to play complementary football. Mac talks about it all the time. You can't play complementary football when one side of the ball is not getting it done. They don't seem to have both working at the same time very often. Mm-hmm. And the offense wasn't great in the first half, but they moved the ball and they got points. So they did enough, but 17-0 isn't going to cut it. In fact, people in the press box were saying at halftime, 17 points isn't going to win this game. No. They're going to need to get up to maybe 27 or 30 to win this game. And that was accurate. So what does this mean? It means that this is a team that's got some issues. They got a lot of holes. And when you look around, I don't know if I see a whole lot of answers for that. And mm-hmm. You've got a coaching staff that's going to have to deal with 2 losses that were just horrible losses. I would argue, and I'm going to write in my column probably, that this loss was worse than last week.
I think you can argue.
Last week, was an awful loss, almost as bad as it gets for a program that fancies itself being pretty competitive. This was worse because you're up 20-0 on the road at your rival. You should be in their heads because they haven't beaten you in a long time. Max should be in Manny's head because he couldn't beat him before. And then you just finger snap, everything goes wrong. Offense goes wrong, defense goes wrong at the same time. Special teams had a 20-yard punt after that. Penalties, how about when they got the fourth down stop? You have a holding penalty, and then after the play ended, an unsportsmanlike personal foul on J.J. Jones, a veteran, and they lost 25 yards there. It's 1st and 35.
It's insane, man.
They're not as clean as they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't adjust real well at times.
No.
They're not that good. That's what it is. What does this mean? I think right now, when you look at the team that we've seen really all 5 games, Pitt, would you pick them to beat Pitt right now?
Oh, no. Absolutely
not. Holstein? Come on. Would you pick them to beat Georgia Tech?
Oh, no.
Oh, the open date, they go to UVA. They could win that game.
Could.
I would give them a 50-50 chance right now of winning at UVA. Then they go to FSU. I mean, who knows what FSU is there? But let's say they go 50-50 at FSU. Then they got Wake at home. I would give them about a 60-40 against Wake.
Yeah, Wake's
they
pretty
go to
bad.
BC. They haven't faced Thomas Castellanos yet.
Mm-hmm.
He's Alonzo Barnett on steroids, if you will. And then they come home and play State. They can beat State right now, the way State's played.
Yeah.
Well, so that's 3 50-50s maybe and a 60-40.
Mm-hmm.
You go split on those, that's 2 more wins. That's not enough for a bowl. So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I just think that what we've seen right now, it would be a logical projection.
Yeah, no, I don't agree at all. I think for what we've seen through 5 games, like you just said, I think the message is pretty simple. It's just not a very good football team, man.
They need to be better. And they hurt themselves. You cannot – how many penalties tonight? It was at least 10 at one point. It was at least 10. You got special teams mistakes. You got penalties. Remember, they're not super consistent on either side of the ball. I think I have it right here.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't see it on.
I have to put my glasses on. I'm going to really charm people with this.
I don't see
penalties. I mean, this is really terrible. 10. This is terrible video work here. 10 penalties.
Yeah, 10. I don't know why I can see that. Yeah.
Very damaging. They beat themselves.
Yeah. And that line of scrimmage, too, yeah.
They're not good enough to overcome that.
Yeah, the adjustments in game haven't proven to be good enough. Again, the line of scrimmage was not proven to be good enough tonight because when Duke got rolling, man, I mean, Carolina's defensive front, I mean, you give up 111 rushing yards in a quarter, man. Your defensive front's not playing very well. And the concern, I think, is like we've talked about in here, is it just flips. And I think the frustration from fans really building up over the last couple of years is, AJ, when it flips, there's no fixing it. It's over, and it flips, and
I agree.
There's no recovering. I think that's a problem that has.
And they got to stop on fourth and 1 or whatever it was, or 4th and what was it, on the incomplete pass down in the end zone.
Yeah.
When Carolina got the stop, but I thought Duke ran a very curious play there. I think it was 4th and 5. I would have rolled something a little bit different, but they don't dot their I's, they don't cross their T's enough. I know I say that a lot, and there's a lot of T's and a lot of I's. And they only dot and cross a few of them. That's a problem that needs to be fixed, and that comes from the top. You need to fix that stuff. You know, if you're going to lose, at least don't beat yourself in losing. If you get beat, you get beat. But they compound the problem by adding to it and making it easier for opponents too often. They did it when things went to hell last year. They did it. Same thing happened 2 years ago. And it happened last week, and it happened in the second half today. So this is kind of who they are, man.
Yeah, it's who they are. And
not rocket science. It's who they are.
No, it's not. It's not at all. A lot of football left this season. It's going to be fascinating to see kind of what this team potentially can be. But I think we're going to be having similar conversations, AJ, to what we've had tonight. That's I think the takeaway from tonight is I think this is who they are, and I don't know necessarily where we're at right now, how it just magically gets a lot better and this team just starts winning a lot of football games. I don't know. Maybe it happens, AJ. I don't have.
It's not a conversation. I asked Mac, how you is it easier to get them to get over this than it was last week? He said, they're both tough. Yeah, but they'll get over it, and the players are saying the right stuff. We've got the players to get it done, but there was almost a numbness to it that I sensed in the post game tonight.
Yeah, it felt like that.
Some of this stuff.
It felt like that. Yeah,
that would be human nature. I mean, if I was one of them, I'd be numb to it as well. But numb is a hard place to come back from.
Yeah. Oh, of course it is. And last thing I'll say, I did think it was worth saying when I was on the field after the game, and immediately after Max walking off, Bubba comes up to him, shakes his hand, and they walk off together. I just want to throw that in there because I do think that was maybe a message to some people. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking into it too deep, but I found that a little interesting.
I didn't see it, so I can't comment.
Yeah, I got a picture of it.
Bubba was in the press conference. I got in the press conference a little late. So, by the way, camera work was terrible because the elevator getting down, they took us to the wrong floor, and we had to kind of
it's impossible
to get down there. And the locker room, which is where the press conference was, right next to the locker room, is located in Briar Creek. And we were in Durham, so we had to go from Durham to Briar Creek, essentially. And I got in, and he was already started, and I'm wobbling around. Sally's sitting down right next to me, literally right next to me. And I think when I asked the question, I startled her because she had no idea I was behind her or sort of next to her. And Bubba was 2 seats to her left, and he got up and left after Mac. He didn't stand for the players. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to read anything into it all. He always does that.
Yeah.
He usually walks out with Mac and talks to him. He walked out with Roy and talked to him. He walked out with Hubert and talked to him. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to read anything into that. I think we should keep it where it is. And I think people can make up their own minds. I'm not at a point where I'm going to make any declarative statements. Not there yet, because we don't react emotionally like some people do. And it's fine if they do. I think that's great because emotion is passion. I'm an emotional, passionate Baltimore Orioles fan. Sometimes I'd say irrational things about them. But in this position, it's not our job to be irrational. It's our job to be cautious and to proceed with real information, with facts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody knows that we do that. So I'm not going to make a declarative statement right now, but 2 weeks in a row in year 6 like this, that's a terrible look.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the wrong thing by saying that. And I think most people around the program understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it ain't rocket science, like you said, man. And again, not trying to look anything into it too. I just thought I'd throw that out there and get your take on it. Cause I happened to be right there for it. And I just thought got a picture of it, thought it was just something.
The 7 people who listened all the way through this are going to take something. They're going to read more into what you said. So.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And again, that's a prerogative. Probably some fans in the stadium, Carolina fans in the stadium that saw it. So again, I mean, you can take what you want with it and keep it moving. So again, 21-20 loss for Carolina in Wallace-Wade Stadium to Duke. Carolina dropping to 3-2 on the year. Duke improving to 5-0 again for the first time since 1994. A long time for them, man. Feeling good in Durham right now. And again, the opposite in Chapel Hill. So I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones on the edition of our 3 Things Postgame Pod. Keep it locked to TarLillustrated.com for all your postgame coverage from tonight. Go to the YouTube channel. I actually thought AJ's camera work was pretty damn good tonight. I was impressed, man. I'm a camera guy. And I watched the postgame. I actually thought you did a pretty good job considering the fact that you were 50 miles.
I was holding a tripod like this and people were bumping me, and Pat Welter made every effort possible to stay out of my way. And he's doing his camera like that. I got the players up front. When Mac walked out, I walked up and sat next to the one and only RL Bynum.
Oh, yeah.
And,
shout out
and those videos look normal, but
I thought it was all right. I thought it was good, man. I'll give you credit.
It was like I was on a boat in a storm.
I think a lot of Carolina fans feel like they're on a boat in the middle of a storm right now, to be honest with you. Just maybe that experience helped them out.
Let's get out of here. I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, man, I hear you. Again, I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Appreciate you guys watching as always. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and the notification bell too, so you know every time we upload. See y'all next time. Thanks.